Alright, greetings and salutations. My name is Comicfire, and welcome for more of the dramatic reading of the Edge Chronicles Beyond the Deepwoods. Last time we finished up with Chapter 9, The Rotsucker, and in this episode we'll be going on with Chapter 10, The Termagant Trogs. Let us begin. It was still. The sun beat down hot and bright. All the vomiting in the sealed pod had left Twig's throat feeling as if it had been sandpapered. He needed a drink. He picked himself up and looked back at his shadow, which stretched far out across the treacherous swamp. At the end of it lay still water. It sparkled tantalizingly. If only there was some way of getting to it without being sucked down into the mud. Twig spat and turned away again. "It's probably stagnant anyway," he muttered. He stomped off across the spongy wasteland. The swamp had once extended this far. Now, apart from the occasional patch of pale green algae, nothing grew. Yet there was life there. With every step Twig took, clouds of vicious wood midges flew up and buzzed round him. They landed on his face, his arms, his legs, and where they landed, so they bit. "Get off! Get away!" Twig cried as he slapped at the voracious insects. "If it's not one thing, it's... yeah!" Slap! Another. Slap, slap, slap. Twig started to run. The wood midges flew with him like satin sheets flapping in the wind. Faster, faster, past the bony skeletons of dead trees, headlong over the bouncy peats, stumbling, slipping but never stopping, out of the desolate home of the evil rotsucker and back into the deep woods. Twig smelled them before he reached them. The loamy soil, the luxuriant foliage, the succulent fruit, familiar scents that set his mouth watering and his heart clapping faster than ever. The wood midges were less impressed. As the rich and fertile smells grew stronger, so their numbers dropped. They abandoned their quarry and returned to the wasteland where the air was pungent and sour. Here's Twig suffering at the hands of those little guys. Twig trudged onwards and upwards. The deep woods wrapped themselves round him like a vast green quilt. There were no tracks, no paths. He had to carve his own way through the lush undergrowth. Through wood fern and bull bracken he went, up slopes and down dips. When he came to a sallow drop tree, he stopped. The sallow drop, with its long waving fronds of pearly leaves, only grew near water. The Bandar-bear had taught him that much. Twig pushed aside the beaded curtains of the hanging branches, and there, babbling over a bed of pebbles, was a stream of crystal-clear water. "Thanks, Sky," Twig rasped and fell to his knees. He cupped his hands and dipped them in the ice-cold water. He took a sip, swallowed, and felt the cold liquid coursing down inside his body. It tasted good, earthy and sweet. He drank more and more. He drank until his stomach was full and his thirst was quenched. With a grateful sigh, Twig dropped down into the stream with a splash. There he is. And there he lay. The water ran over him, soothing the wood midge bites, cleaning his clothes and hair. He remained there until every trace of mud and vomit and stinking bile had been washed away. "Clean again," he said, and pulled himself back onto his knees. All at once a flash of orange danced across the water. Twig froze. Wigwig was orange. Head still bowed, Twig raised his eyes and peered nervously through his lank and dripping hair. Crouched down behind a rock on the far side of the stream was not a wigwig, but a girl. A girl with pale, almost translucent skin and a shock of orange hair. Company. "Hey!" Twig called out. But the girl darted out of sight. Twig leapt to his feet. "Oi!" he yelled as he splashed across the stream. Why wouldn't she wait? He leaped up across the bank and onto the rock. Some way ahead, he noticed the girl dodging behind a tree. "I won't hurt you," he panted to himself. "I'm nice. Honest." By the time he reached the tree, however, the girl was gone again. He saw her glance back before slipping into a glade of swaying great grass. Twig dashed in after her. He wanted her to stop, to come back, to talk to him. On and on he ran, around trees, across clearings, always close but never quite close enough. As she raced behind a broad and ivy-clad trunk, the girl looked back for a third time. Twig felt the hairs at the nape of his neck stand on end. His hamel-horn skin waistcoat bristled. What if the girl wasn't checking to see whether she'd given him the slip? What if she was making sure he was still following? He kept on, but more cautiously now. Round the tree he went, and the girl was nowhere to be seen. Twig looked up into the branches. His heart was hammering, his scalp tingled. There could be anything hiding up in the dense foliage waiting to pounce. Anything at all. Round the tree he went. He fingered his amulets. He took another step forwards. Where was the girl? Was it all just another horrible trap? Ah! Twig screamed. The ground had opened up and Twig was falling. Into the earth he tumbled, and down a long curving tunnel. Bump, roll, bump, bump, roll, bumpity roll, crash, bang, and plaff. Down onto a thick bed of soft straw. Twig looked up, dazed. Everything was spinning. Yellow lights, twisted roots, and 4 faces staring down at him. "Where you been?" 2 of them were saying. "You know I don't like you going up ground. It's too dangerous. You'll get carried off by the gloam-glozer one day, my girl, and that's a fact." "I can look after myself," the other 2 replied sulkily. Twig shook his head. The 4 faces became 2. The larger one loomed closer, all bloodshot eyes and corrugated lips. "And watch this," it complained. "Oh, Mag, what have you brought back now?" The pale-skinned girl stroked Twig's hair. "It followed me home, Mumsy," she said. "Can I keep it?" And here are those 2. The older woman pulled her head away and folded her arms, breathing in, and swelling up as she did so. She stared at Twig suspiciously. "I trust he's not a talker," she said. "I told you before, I draw the line at pets that can talk." Twig swallowed anxiously. Mag shook her head. "I don't think so, Mumsy. The occasional noise, but no words." Mumsy grunted. "You better be telling me the truth. Talkers mean trouble." Mumsy was enormous, with rippling forearms and a neck as broad as her head. What was more, unlike the girl whose pale skin made her almost invisible in the subterranean gloom, Mumsy was all too visible. With the exception of her face, almost every bit of exposed skin was covered with iridescent tattoos. There were trees, weapons, symbols, animals, faces, dragons, skulls, you name it. Even her bald head had been tattooed. What Twig had first taken for curls of hair plastered to her scalp were in fact coiled snakes. She reached up and thoughtfully scratched under her broad nose, inadvertently flexing her biceps as she did. The sleeve of her patterned dress rode up with a rustle, and Twig found himself staring at a picture of a young girl with fiery orange hair. Beneath it, in indigo letters, was a tattooed message: "Mumsy loves Mag." "Well," said Mag. Her mother sniffed. "Mag," she said, "you can be such a trying trog at times. But I suppose so." "However," she said, interrupting Mag's whoops of delight, "you're responsible for it, do you understand? You feed it, you exercise it, and if it makes a mess in the cabin, you clean it up. Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal clear, Mumsy," said Mag. "And if I hear so much as a single word," she went on, "I'll wring its scrawny little neck. Right?" Mag nodded. She reached forward and grabbed Twig by the hair. "Come on," she said. "Ah!" Twig yelped and slapped her hand away. "It hit me," Mag howled at once. "Mumsy, my pet hit me. It hurt me." Twig suddenly felt himself being whisked up the floor and swung round. He stared petrified into the Trog woman's ferocious bloodshot eyes. "If you ever push, slap, scratch, or bite my little moonbeam, I'll—" "Or in any other way hurt my body," Mag butted in. "Or in any other way hurt her body, I'll—" "Or my feelings." "Hurt her body or her feelings, I'll—" "Or try to run away." "Or try to run away," Mumsy repeated. "You're dead." Her paper dress rustled as she shook him. "Obedient and dumb. That's the rule, okay?" Twig didn't know whether to nod or not. If he wasn't allowed to speak, was he expected to understand? With Mumsy's massive fist gripping his coat so tightly he could scarcely move anyway. She sniffed and dropped him onto the floor. Twig looked up warily. Mag was standing behind her mother, her hands held primly at her front. Her face bore an expression of impossible smugness. She leant forward and tugged his hair for a second time. Wincing with pain, Twig climbed passively to his feet. "That's more like it," Mumsy growled. "What are you gonna call it?" she said. Mag shrugged and turned to her new pet. "Have you got a name?" she said. "Twig," he replied automatically, and immediately wished that he hadn't. "What's that?" roared Mumsy. "Was that a word?" She prodded Twig hard in the chest. "Are you a talker after all?" "Twig, twig, twig, twig," he said, desperately trying to make it sound as unword-like as possible. "Twig, twig, twig." Mag put her arm around Twig's shoulders and smiled up at her mother. "I think I'll call him Twig." Mumsy glared at Twig through narrowed eyes. "One word, that's all," she snarled, "and I'll rip your head off." "Twig's going to be just fine," Mag reassured her. "Come along, boy," she said to him. "Let's go and play." Mumsy stood, hands on hips, watching as Mag dragged him away. Twig kept his head down. "I'll be keeping my eye on that one," he heard her say. "You'll see if I don't." As they continued along the tunnel, Mumsy's threats faded away. There were stairs and ramps and long narrow slopes that took them lower, always lower, deep into the ground. Twig felt uneasy at the thought of all that weight and earth, at the weight of all that earth and rock above him. What was to stop it falling down? What was to stop it swallowing him up? All at once the oppressive walkway came to an end. Twig stared round him, trembling with amazement. The pair of them were standing in an immense underground cavern. Mag let go of his hair. "You'll like it down here with us ptarmigan trogs, Twig," she was saying. "It's never too hot, it's never too cold. There was no rain, no snow, no wind, no dangerous plants, no wild beasts." Twig's fingers moved automatically to the tooth around his neck, and a tear trickled down his cheek. No dangerous plants and no wild beasts, he thought. But no sky, no moon. The girl prodded him roughly in the back, and Twig walked on. And no freedom. Like the tunnels, the cavern glowed with a pale light. Below his feet, the ground had been trampled flat under generations of trog feet. Above, the lofty ceiling towered far above his head. Spanning the two like knobbly pillars were long, thick, gnarled roots. It's like a mirror image of the deep woods themselves, he thought. But the deep woods of winter, where the trees are stripped and bare. Bathed in the cavern's glow, the roots were gaunt and twisted, and Twig gasped. He'd been wrong. The light wasn't shining on the tree roots, but from them. "Twig!" barked Mag sternly as he ran for a closer look. White, yellow, mushroom brown, at least half the long, thick roots were giving out a softly pulsing glow. Twig placed his hand against one. It was warm and throbbed faintly. "Twig!" Mag screeched. "Hail!" Twig looked round. Mag was glaring menacingly. Obedient and dumb, Twig remembered. He trotted over and stood by her side. Mag patted him on the head. "Interested in the roots, are you?" she said. "They provide us with all we need." Twig nodded, but remained silent. "Light, of course," said Mag, pointing to the roots that glowed. "Food?" And broke off 2 nodules from some fibrous roots. One she popped in her mouth. The other she handed to Twig, who stared at it unenthusiastically. "Eat! Go on," said Mag insistently. And when Twig still refused to put it into his mouth, she added sweetly, "I'll tell Mumsy." And here's the root system. The nodule was crunchy and juicy. It tasted of toasted nuts. Twig mumbled and licked his lips theatrically. Mag smiled and moved on. "These we dry and grind for flour," she explained. "These we pulp and turn into paper. These burn well. And this," she began, stopping next to a bulbous flesh-colored root. "Strange," she said and frowned. I didn't know these grew wild. She turned to Twig and looked him up and down. Twig, she said sternly, you must never, ever eat this type of root. A little further on they came to a place where most of the vertical roots had been cut to form a clearing around a deep lake of dark water. Those roots which remained fanned out near the ground, domed and serpentine. In amongst them was a collection of huge capsules, each one separate from but connected to its neighbor. Rounded, buff-colored, with small dark circular entrances, the capsules formed a mound up to 5 stories high in places. The trog combs are where we live, said Mag. Follow me. Twig smiled to himself. Mag hadn't grabbed him by the hair. She was beginning to trust him. The capsules, Twig discovered, were made of a thicker, papery substance like Mumsy's dress, only thicker. It cracked under his feet as Twig stumbled up the interconnecting walkways and echoed hollowly when he tapped on the round walls. Don't do that, said Mag sharply. It annoys the neighbors. Mag's capsule was situated to the top left of the mound and was considerably larger inside than it looked from the outside. The light from the roots glowed creamily through the walls. Twig sniffed. There was a hint of cinnamon in the air. You must be tired, Mag announced. Your place is over there, she said, pointing to a basket. Mumsy doesn't like pets sleeping on my bed, she grinned mischievously. But I do. Come on up, you jump, she said, patting the end of the bed. I won't tell her if you don't, she said, and burst out laughing. Twig did as he was told, forbidden as it might have been. But the thick papery mattress was soft and warm. Twig fell instantly into a deep and dreamless sleep. Some hours later, day and night had no meaning in the constant glow of the Trog dwellings, Twig woke to the feeling of someone patting his head. He opened his eyes. Sleep well, said Mag brightly. Twig grunted. Good, she said, jumping out of bed, 'cause we've got loads to do. We'll do a spotted nodule collecting and root milk tapping for breakfast. Then after we've cleaned up, Mumsy wants to help us with some paper making. So many of us girls have been turning termagant recently, they've been running out of dress material. And then if you're good, Mag continued without taking a breath, we'll go walkies. But first of all, she said, fiddling with his hair and running her fingers gently over his cheek. First of all, Twig, darling, I'm going to make you look beautiful. Twig groaned and watched miserably as Mag busied herself in a small cupboard. A moment later she was back, carrying a tray full of bits and pieces. There, she said, placing it on the floor. Now come and sit in front of me. Reluctantly, Twig did as he was told. Mag took a soft grey lump of spongy root fibre and washed him with water she'd fetched from the lake earlier and perfumed with rose root. Next she patted him dry and drenched him in a dark, spicy powder. When Twig sneezed, Mag wiped his running nose for him with a handkerchief. It's the indignity of it all, Twig thought, as he turned his head angrily away. Now, Mag chided him, we wouldn't want Mumsy to hear you've been a naughty pet, would we? Twig fell still and remained so as Mag picked up a wooden comb and begun to tease the tangles from his matted hair. Here's that going down. You've got nice hair, Twig, she said. Thick and black. She tugged vigorously at a stubborn knot. But very tangled. Why under earth did you let it get into this state? She tugged again. Twig winced. His eyes watered, and he bit into his lower lip until the blood came. But he didn't make a sound. I brush my hair twice a day, said Mag, throwing back her bright orange mane with a toss of her head. She got closer to Twig. Soon, she whispered, it will fall out, every single hair, and then I too will turn termagant, just like Mumsy. Twig nodded sympathetically. I can't wait! Mag exclaimed to his surprise. A termagant! Can you imagine, my little Twig darling? She lay the comb down. No, she said, of course you can't. But that's because you're a male, and males... She stopped to uncork a small bottle and poured some thick yellow liquid into the palm of her hand. It was sweet, yet pungent, and as she rubbed it into Twig's hair, his scalp tingled and his eyes began to smart. Can't be termagant, she paused again. Then, selecting a small bunch of hair from the rest, She split it into 3 thin locks and began to plait it. "Mumsy said it's all because of the root. The mother blood oak," she said reverently. Twig shuddered at the very mention of the bloodthirsty, flesh-hungry tree, which had so nearly taken his own life. He stroked his hamel-horn skin waistcoat thankfully. "It's that pinky root we saw on the way here, Twig," she went on as she threaded beads onto the finished braid. "Do you remember? The one I told you never to eat? It's poisonous for males, you see. Deadly poisonous," she said in a hushed whisper. "They're not for us females," she added. Twig heard her chuckle as she separated a second bunch of hair. "It's the root sap that makes Mumsy and all the others so big and strong. When the mother blood oak course is red, the termagants shall all be fed. That's how the saying goes." Twig flinched. When the mother blood oak course is red, that was something he knew all about. His stomach churned queasily as Mag continued to braid and beat his hair. "Oh, you're beginning to look pretty, Twig," said Mag. Twig grimaced. "Of course," she went on thoughtfully, "the trog males aren't happy with the situation. Horrible, scrawny, sneaky, weedy, weaselly individuals that they are," she said, screwing up her nose in disgust. She sighed. "Still, they have their uses. After all, someone has to cook and clean." "Thank Sky I'm just a pet," thought Twig. "They tried to sabotage everything once," she went on, "before I was born. Apparently all the males got together and tried to burn the mother blood oak down. The termagants were furious. Beat them black and blue, they did. They haven't tried anything since," she added and laughed unpleasantly. "Useless bunch of wasters." Twig felt 3 more beads being knotted into place. "Anyway," said Mag more quietly, "these days the main roots are well guarded." Her voice trailed away. "There," she announced. "Turn round and let me look at you." Twig did so. "Perfect," she said. "Come on, Twig darling, let's go and see about that breakfast." Time passed as time does, though in the unchanging trog cabin it was difficult to tell how much. Certainly Mag seemed to be forever clipping the nails on his fingers and toes, and the last time she groomed his hair she commented more than once on how long it had grown. Pampered and petted by Mag and the other trog females, Twig's life with the termagants was pleasant enough, yet he found the subterranean world oppressive. He missed fresh air and the bite of the wind. He missed sunrise and sunset. He missed the smell of rain, the sound of birdsong, the color of the sky. Most of all, he missed the Banderbear. The curious thing about living underground, beneath the deep woods with its terrors and dangers, was that it gave Twig time to think. With the Banderbear there'd been no need to think at all. There was always food to be foraged. There were always sleeping places to be found. Now with everything on hand, Twig had nothing to do but think. When he first arrived, Mag seldom let Twig out of her sight. Lately, however, the novelty of having a new pet seemed to have worn off. Mag fitted him with a collar and taken to tethering him to her bed whenever she went out without him. The rope was long enough for Twig to go anywhere he wanted within the papery capsule, and even allowed him to get halfway down the stairs outside. But each time he reached the end of the rope and the collar tightened round his neck, Twig was reminded that he was a prisoner, and his heart longed to return to the deep woods above. Poor Twig. Perhaps he would finally find the path and return home to his family. Spelda would be overjoyed at her son returning from the deep woods. Even Tum-Tum might smile, clap him on the back, and invite him on a tree-felling trip. Everything would be different. He'd fit in this time, try harder. He'd do what wood trolls do, think wood troll thoughts, and he'd never, never stray from the path again. The collar chafed his neck. And then again, he thought, wouldn't he just be as much a prisoner if he did go back? Forever trying to be like a wood troll but never quite belonging? He thought of the cater bird. What had become of it? "So much for watching over me," he muttered bitterly. "Your destiny lies beyond the deep woods," it had told him. "Beyond," he said. "Beneath, more like, with my destiny to remain the pampered pet of a spoiled child. Oh, Gloam-Glozer," he cursed. There was a rustling outside the trog comb. Twig froze. "I must stop talking to myself," he thought. "One of these days I'll be found out." There was a rustling outside the trog comb. The next moment, Mag came bursting into the capsule. She had a folded length of brown paper over one arm. I've been told to prepare myself, she announced excitedly. She laid the paper out on the floor and began drawing. Twig nodded towards it and looked puzzled. Mag smiled. Soon, Twig, darling, she said, I will have this tattooed on my back. Twig looked down at the picture with more interest. It was of a massive, muscular termagant, legs apart, hands on hips, and with a ferocious expression on the face. We all do, she explained. Twig smiled weakly. He pointed to the picture, then at Mag herself, then back at the picture. Yes, said Mag, it's me, or will be. Twig pointed to himself and cocked his head to one side. Oh, Twig, she whispered gently, I'll always love you. Twig sat back reassured. At that moment, however, there came from outside the sound of heavy footfalls. Twig's feeling of well-being dissolved, and he began chewing the corner of his scarf. It was Mumsy. Mag! She screeched. Mag! Mag looked up. I'm in here, she called back, and the entrance was filled with the towering figure of Mumsy herself. You ought to come with me, she said to Mag. Now. Is it time? Mag asked eagerly. It's time, came the gruff reply. Mag leapt off the bed. Did you hear that, Twig? It's time! Come on! You'll not need no pet where you're going, said Mumsy. Oh, Mumsy, please, Mag wheedled. I'm telling you, you won't want it there. Not after. I will, said Mag defiantly. Twig looked from one side to the other. Mumsy was scowling. Mag was smiling. You would like to come, wouldn't you? She said. Twig smiled back. Anything was better than more time spent tethered to the bed. He nodded his head vigorously up and down. You see? I told you. Mumsy snorted. You credit that animal with far too much sense. Please, Mumsy, please, Mag pleaded. Oh, if you must, said Mumsy wearily as she gathered up the printed paper. But you're to keep it on its lead. She rounded on Twig and fixed him with a bloodshot glare. And woe betide you if you do anything at all, to spoil Mom Egg's big day. There was an air of expectation outside. The paths leading round the lake were thick with female trogs all heading in the same direction. Some were neighbors who Twig recognized. Some were strangers to him. See how far they've come, said Mag delightedly. On the far side of the lake they came to a high fence which formed a vast circular enclosure. Clusters of thin, listless males hung round the guarded entrance. They cringed and whispered as Mumsy cut a swath through them. Stay close, Twig, Mag snapped and yanked at the lead. Together the three of them entered the enclosure. As they appeared, a roar of approval went up from the crowd assembled inside. Mag hung her head and smiled shyly. Twig was greeted by a sight that he could scarcely believe was real, extending down from far above his head, which was an enormous set of roots fanned out near the ground to form an immense and lofty dome. Hand in hand around it stood the termagants, their tattooed skin bathed in the roots' fleshy pink light. Mumsy took hold of Mag's hand. Come, she said. Here, said one of the guards. That creature can't come inside the inner sanctuary. Mumsy noticed the lead still wound around Mag's other hand. Course it can't, she said. She snatched the lead away and tied one end firmly to a twist of root. You can get it later, she said and chuckled throatily. This time Mag made no move to stop her. As if in a trance, she stepped through the break in the circle of hands and on into the dome of roots itself. She did not look back. Twig peered through the gaps in the roots. At the very center was the taproot. Thick and knobbly, it glowed brighter than all the rest. Mag, his little Mag, was standing with her back to it. Her eyes were closed. Suddenly the termagants began to chant, Oh, Mama, Mother, Blood Oak! Oh, Mama, Mother, Blood Oak! Over and over, louder and louder they cried until the entire cabin quaked with the deafening noise. Twig clamped his hands over his ears. In front of the taproot, Mag had begun to squirm and writhe. All at once the cacophony came to an end. The silence trembled uncertainly. Twig watched as Mag turned to face the root. She raised her arms. She looked upward. "Bleed for me!" she cried. Before her voice had faded away, a sudden change came over the dome. The termagants gasped. Twig jumped away fearfully as the root he was tethered to abruptly changed color. He looked round. The whole vast network of roots was glowing a deep and bloody crimson. "Yes," cried Mumsy, "the time is indeed upon our daughter Mag." She pulled a small object from the folds of her paper dress. Twig squinted to see. It looked like the tap from a barrel. She placed it against the pulsing red central root and hammered it home with her fist. Then, smiling at Mag, she pointed to the floor. Mag knelt before the spout, raised her head and opened wide her mouth. Mumsy turned the spigot and a stream of frothing red liquid immediately gushed out. It splashed over her head and streamed down her back, her arms, her legs. Twig saw Mag's shoulders rising and falling in the crimson light. "She's drinking it!" he shuddered. Mag drank and drank and drank. She drank so much that Twig thought she might burst. Finally she sighed a deep sigh and let her head fall forward. Mumsy switched off the flow of liquid. Mag climbed unsteadily to her feet. Twig gasped. The thin, pale-skinned girl was beginning to expand. Upwards, outwards, her whole body was growing larger. The flimsy dress she'd been wearing split and fell to the ground. And still she grew. Massive shoulders, bulging biceps, tree-trunked legs, and her head. It was already immense, when suddenly the hair, that wild shock of orange, cascaded down to the ground. The transformation was complete. "Welcome," said Mumsy, wrapping the freshly painted dress around the newest termagant in the Trog cabin. "Welcome," cried the circle of her termagant sisters. And here's that, just a frightening image. Mag turned slowly round in acknowledgement. Twig recoiled with fear. Where was the pale, thin girl who had loved him and looked after him? Gone. In her place was a fearsome and terrible termagant Trog. Once tattooed, she would look exactly like her mother, Mumsy. Mag continued to look around. Their eyes met. She smiled. Twig smiled back. Perhaps she hadn't changed. Inside, at least. A thick, slobbering tongue, like a slab of liver, emerged from Mag's mouth and slurped over her corrugated lips. Her bloodshot eyes glinted. "You little piece of vermin!" she bellowed. Twig looked over her shoulders in horror. Surely she couldn't be addressing him. Not her pet, not her Twig darling. "Mag!" he cried out. "Mag, it's me!" "Ah!" screamed Mumsy. "I knew he was a talker." "Yes," said Mag coldly, "but not for much longer." Twig felt the earth shaking as she pounded towards him. With trembling fingers he tugged at the knot. In vain. Mumsy had tied it far too tight. Twig gripped hold of the rope, placed both feet up against the root, and pressed back as hard as he possibly could. Nothing happened. "Don't even think of escaping," Mag roared. Twig shifted his grip and tried again. There was a crack, and he flew back through the air. The rope had held, but not the root. A frothing red substance oozed from where it had been severed. "Oh!" Mag raged. Twig turned on his heels and ran. He darted between two of the guards and sprinted down towards the lake. The Trog male stood around gawping. "Move!" Twig yelled as he elbowed them out of the way. He could hear Mag behind him, followed closely by the rest of the termagants. "Rip out his gizzards!" they were screeching. "Tear off his legs! Smash him to smithereens!" Twig reached the lake. He sped away to the left. A group of half-dozen termagant males were standing in front of him. "Stop him!" Mag ordered loudly. "Catch the little beast!" Then louder still when they simply stepped aside as Twig thundered past. "You pathetic little morons!" Twig glanced back over his shoulder. Mag was gaining on him. There was a look of terrible determination in her bloodshot eyes. Oh, Mag, he thought, what have you become? Mag drew level with the Trog males. They were watching her askance. All, that is, apart from one. As Mag lumbered past him, he stuck out his leg. It caught Mag's foot. She stumbled, she lurched, she lost her balance and came crashing to the ground. And here's that. Twig gasped with surprise. It had been no accident. Mag sprawled round and made a grab for the Trog male, but he was too agile for her. He leapt to his feet, limped out of reach, and looked up. Cupping his hands to his mouth, he called for Twig. "What are you waiting for? Head for the roots where they shine brightest, over in that direction." There was a wheedling, mocking tone to his voice. Twig looked round. "Well," the Trog male gave a twisted smile, "do you want to be skinned alive by your little mistress? Follow the wind, pampered pet, and don't look back." And that is the end of Chapter 10. We will pick back up next time with Chapter 11. Thank you for joining me, and have yourself a wonderful day.